Hello, you're listening to the Charles Bonnet Syndrome podcast. My name is Shaimond, and today's special guest is Selene Carboni. She teaches people with visual impairments how to become artists and how to create art. So how are you doing today?
Hi, Shaimond. I'm on cloud nine to be with you today, and thank you very much for hosting me. I really appreciate what you are doing for the visual impaired community.
Thank you so much. And I forgot to mention in your introduction that you're coming all the way from Italy.
Yes.
It's a very beautiful country. Everyone always says how nice it is. I've been to Rome once, but I can't wait to go back and visit other regions of the country. It's very beautiful.
You are welcome in my country. It's fantastic. So you have to come
you.
back. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. So can you explain a little bit about what it is that you do and who you are?
Yes, of course. After obtaining my master's degree in art at the University of Milan in Italy, I worked as a museum educator. I was given the chance to work at a low vision and rehabilitation center in a hospital with a team of experts in the interdisciplinary perspective suited for the visual impaired community. And I got very excited to be able to continue to work with people. I began to notice that often the artistic activity was not always connected with the medical and psychological part, so I started to conduct research. After getting my master's degree in art, I had the opportunity to participate in a course to teach history of art to the visual impaired people at the Anteros Tactile Museum at the Francesco Cavazza Institute for the Blind in Bologna. In this museum, famous paintings are translated into perspective bas-reliefs to facilitate the access to artistic paintings of historical significance for visually impaired people. I love the way these paintings were made accessible, and I became very interested in this topic. After a bit, I spent 5 months at the University of Toronto in Canada, studying drawings made by blind people with my mentor, Professor John Kennedy. The research conducted with John and my colleagues during the drawing workshop sections helps reveal the scope of imaginary in people who are blind. And now I'm giving some lectures within the course of Psychology of Art of Professor Riccardo Manzotti at Ulm University in Milano.
So some people say that people that are blind can't draw or they can't do art. What would you have to say about that?
Well, I think that is not true for my direct experience. Very often I'm asked this question. People are surprised. Most people do not understand the ability of blind people to image and picture and so to draw. For example, during a lecture, one participant told me that she had never imagined that blind people could draw, because in her imagination she was thinking to the blind people as inside the painting The Blind Leading the Blind by Peter Bruegel the Elder. In this painting, you can find a procession of 6 blind and disfigured men walking together. The leader of the group has fallen on his back into a ditch, and because they are all linked by their staffs, seems about to drag his companions down with him. Fortunately, this stereotype has been overcome. To answer your question, yes, absolutely. Blind people can have a fulfilling life and can engage in many activities, including drawing. And I would like to add not only that they can draw, but that they should draw.
That's good, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with Charles Bonnet Syndrome, but first of all, let me ask that question. Are you familiar with Charles Bonnet Syndrome?
Yes, I know the pathology because I work at the Low Vision and Rehabilitation Center, but during my tactile workshop, I had only one patient with Charles Bonnet Syndrome.
Okay. And I want to let the audience know that you don't have a visual impairment. You
No.
help people who have a visual impairment become artists, and you give workshops, and you're a teacher, and that's what you do, right?
Yes, exactly. I help blind people, especially if they are children, to discover the beauty of art.
That's so amazing because with Charles Bonnet Syndrome, sometimes, and probably just being blind in general, you can be isolated, you can be self-conscious, you may not want to share some of the experiences that you're having. And one of the things that can help with Charles Bonnet Syndrome is to keep your mind active, to have hobbies, to do things that you may like and find new hobbies. And art is a beautiful thing. This is really important work that you do, regardless if you have Charles Bonnet syndrome. Just with a visual impairment, giving people something to do, helping them to be able to tap into the creativity that's inside of them.
Ah, yes, absolutely. And it will be interesting to see whether the exploration of tactile imagery, diminishing bonnet imagery, it will be interesting to make some task and see what happens.
Can you tell or explain to the audience how you work with the visually impaired? Like, how do they actually draw, and how do you teach them how?
Yes, first of all, a visually impaired person can draw using a raised line drawing kit created using a polyester film sheet, line on a drawing board with a rubberized surface. Lines drawn on the film with a ballpoint pen can raise and tactile, easily traced by fingers. And we can ask to blind person to draw everything. For example, can you make, for example, a drawing of your mom, your house, your dog? And they can start with a freehand drawing or follow our task.
What is it like when someone that has a visual impairment starts drawing and they maybe thought they couldn't draw it or thought they wouldn't like it, and then they start becoming better at it and like it? Can you explain that, or maybe give an example of maybe one of the people that you taught?
Ah, yes. I receive a variety of feedback. For example, children happy to draw like their peers and ask me, "Oh, this pen is red or yellow because this color is used from my friends." Or make some freehand drawing their favorite pet or musical group. For example, I was astonished when Elena, a 10 years old girl, drew the Beatles with a straight line departing from the circle for the head because she told me the musician had long hair. Or by contrast, adults shy and reluctant to try because they have never drawn in their life, only to discover the beauty of the activity and decide to continue drawing.
That's amazing. So, do you find that in order to be an artist that you have to have had sight when you were younger and maybe lost it, or even someone that's born blind can develop as an artist?
Even a person who born blind can become an artist because we can use other senses. For example, the touch, that is the first sense born in our body. And all people can become an artist and can enjoy, in general, art.
Oh, that is so great to hear. So, what would you say to someone that's listening and saying, this is interesting, but I can never do this? Or how could they maybe practice or start trying to do something like this, to draw or become a painter or an artist?
First of all, the people can start to draw. There are different kind of phases. And blind people can arrive at the same level to the sighted people, of course, after practice. There are different stages about drawing development following the theory of John Willatz. John Willatz is a psychologist and artist known for his research on pictorial system of depiction and perspective. Drawing development starts with scribbles. For example, these scribbles stands for my mom, my dad, my house, my dog. This means to create a mark on the paper about what I'm thinking and name it. In the second phase, the blind and the sighted drew recognizable shape. For example, a single square stands for a cube. They reproduce part of the shape of the object by similarity geometry. In stage 3, blind and sighted participant drew three-dimensional object with many faces. For example, a cube is drawn with 2 or 3 or 4, 5 or 6 faces folded out. A car, as in Maria's drawing, Maria is a participant in our study, is drawn with 2 or 3 or 4 sides. In this way, they copy multiple aspects. In stage 4, that is the last stage, blind and sighted participants use parallel perspective to show depth. Later, they may use convergent perspective, which is called linear perspective. They change from copying the shape of the object in stage 2 to copy the directions to the part of the object in stage 4. Let's propose an interesting bridge between stage 1 scribbles and stage 2 single shape by similarity geometry. The bridge is the theory of regions, where there is an inside and an outside to summarize in extreme. But Arnheim proposed a similar theory. Maybe you know that good examples about the theory of regions is shown in our last paper, Apple and the Pin, drawing by blind novices, show occluded features, in which we reported tangible raised line drawings by young blind people who are novices at drawing. And it was fantastic seeing the children during the drawing sections. They start with freehand drawing, and then we ask to draw an apple with the pin through it. To do so, they also include the segments of the pin inside the apple. So according to the region theory, what is in the interior of the object should be shown in the drawing, even if it cannot be seen or touched. As a result, since occluded parts of the pin are inside the apple, blind children, like sighted children, include them in their drawings. In region theory, for both blind and sighted, long lines on a 2D pictorial surface represent elongated objects in the scene, and regions on the surface represent 3D objects and their content.
The place where you work, they have a lot of different resources for people who are visually impaired, like art and maybe science or something, or sports. Do they do other things for people that are visually impaired also?
Not really. There are a lot of associations divided, for example, between sports, art, work, and other things or other hobbies, but they are not all inside to one institution.
Okay. And I understand that you've traveled a bit and you've worked in different countries. Can you explain maybe where else you worked and some of the kind of work you did?
Yes, in Canada, I work in a research project to analyze the drawing made by blind people. So people who are born blind, so early blind people, made some drawings and we analyze the drawing, compare with other and previous theories and try to create a new theory. In Italy, instead, I worked as a museum educator. Inside the museum, there are the Unione Ciechi, who is the blind union in Italy, and we work together to analyze some artworks, and they can explain the artwork too to the sighted people. And in the hospital, there is another activity where I made the drawing workshop sections and also the clay modeling workshop, especially for the blind children in the developmental age.
And that's so important that you do research, because research is so important. There's so many aspects of research that are important. And when I think of research, I think of finding a cure for a disease or finding why someone has Charles Bonnet Syndrome or some other kind of condition. But you can also, like you said, figure out like how this person's artwork is or how they are able to work as an artist, or comparing them to maybe someone that has sight or that was born blind. So that's so important. Do you have plans to maybe do any other research?
Of course, I want to continue to do this research on this topic, analyze drawing, and also I will be curious to understand the reaction of touch after touching the artworks or a translation of artworks, if we think about paintings or a photograph, so to the images. And in general, I think that these research are important to create awareness of the possibility that visually impaired people has to draw, especially if we have the patients who are children in the developmental age, as I said before. Moreover, this can be a good opportunity to educate parents, teachers, museum educators, and also the medical professionals as to why they should take the drawing section seriously. Awareness is definitely the key, and the research paper and podcast like this can help to share this message.
And I understand you're an art historian. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm an art historian, and during my university period, I have the opportunity to participate in a course to teach art to the blind. And it was an emotion when I went to the Tactile Museum in Bologna and I see all these fantastic bas-reliefs who reproduce the famous paintings, especially Italian, but not only, and touch them and discover them not only through the sight but also through touch. And I was guided by the blind person who teach me how I can feel the bas-relief, I can perceive the details and the texture inside the composition, and it was an incredible experience.
Wow, that's amazing. So they have a tactile museum in Bologna.
Yes. In Italy, we have 5 tactile museums now, but in Bologna and in Ancona, we have 2 historical tactile museums. They have already 25 years old. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. So do you know if those museums were created for people that are blind or visually impaired, or is it just for everybody?
specific for blind and visually impaired people, but they are open for all people that want to try this experience that is difficult sometimes to find in the normal museum.
That's amazing. I think about something here in the States. It was actually in New York. They probably do it in other places. There's someone that I spoke to, his spouse is blind. And in order for us to be able to have empathy for our loved ones and understand them a little bit better, they actually went to a special kind of dinner where people that were
Yes.
blind will go. And then what they would do is they would cut the lights off and it was black and you couldn't see anything and you had to eat with your senses, couldn't see. And it was a way to try to let you experience a little bit of what they experienced, even though it was temporary. And I found that to be interesting.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful because you, first of all, you keep more attention to some details, tactile details, sound, perfume, and a lot of these things. And you become awareness about the importance of the sight if you are sighted, because sometimes we don't consider the importance of our senses and we don't use it in a proper and deeper way.
Because sometimes people that don't have sight can have more sight than a person with sight because
Yes.
they can be more in tune and in touch and maybe have empathy or use some of the other senses. I would think that something like that, also a dinner experience like that, can cause you to have more empathy too, because you're like, wow, okay, it's one thing to talk about it or think about it, but it's another thing to experience. And I know that's temporary, maybe 1 hour or something, maybe 2 hours, but some people, obviously, it's a lifetime. So can you maybe discuss some of the differences? Because I know they have the ADA in America, the Americans with Disability Act, and each country is a little bit unique with the way in that they help people that have a disability or visual impairment. Can you maybe talk about some of the differences living in Canada and living in Italy as far as things that you've seen or things that you've noticed, or even any other country? Is there a big difference?
Not really. Both has association who help blind people. For example, you can find association who help you to move around or have some different hobbies. And also in Italy, and I found that also in Canada, there is this kind of people who help blind people to move around and have a good quality of life.
That's good to hear. It's good firsthand experiences. I'm still thinking about what you said, the Tactile Museum, and they probably have some here in the States, in America, but maybe, I don't know, I don't hear about them. But there's a lot of resources out there people just reach, like you said. I think it's almost like mandatory that each country or each state has like a commission for the blind or something. And sometimes the information is like right there, but you got to reach out for it. They don't just tell you. And that's why it's so good to maybe listen to this podcast or maybe go to a support group or maybe go to a place like where you work and you can get connected with people because people and know information and they can really share some things with you. And then you can maybe say, man, I can't get out the house. And then you can realize maybe there's a service that could take you out or someone that you can partner with. Or I have Charles Bonnet Syndrome and it's really getting me down. You're not alone. Maybe there's somebody else you can talk to and maybe you can even help that person.
Yes.
Even though you didn't, even sometime when you need help yourself, you can still help someone. And or just showing up is important too. If they have a support group for whatever it is, obviously this is about Charles Bonnet, this podcast, but for whatever it is, just being there because there's not much of a group without the group. So yeah, that's so important. So if someone wanted to contact you, do you have an email that you want to maybe leave? I can put it in the show notes too, but if someone wanted to ask.
Yes, you can follow my activity on LinkedIn, type my name, Selene Carboni, or if you want to contact me directly, you can send an email at carboniselene@gmail.com, and I will be very, very happy to respond to you and discuss this issue with you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure someone may reach out, and this is very inspirational, and it's good to hear this. And like I say, there's so many things that you can do if you have a visual impairment. There's some people that climb mountains. There's some people that do all sorts of things. There's so much you can do. I speak to people, even on this podcast, who travel the world. And some people I know, depending on how long they've been visually impaired or what the condition is or how their mind is, maybe they might be a little sad or something or think that they can't do something. But sky's the limit. You can do so much. And so obviously the art inspires you. Do you ever have any kind of like display of the art or any art exhibits with your students' work or something? Do you ever do things like that?
No, not yet. But I hope some days I can expose the drawing made by the blind people, my student, and I hope they will be happy to show their works.
And that can inspire other people to see some things. So obviously, you teach people how to draw, but you teach people how to do things in a tactile way also. How much of it is tactile and how much of it is maybe just drawing with a pen? Do you know what percentage maybe? Or
No, not really, but it will be fantastic to investigate this particular percentage.
Okay, that is really interesting because obviously with the tactile portion, and they even have kits that I heard that you can use, and those are really helpful and those can help. But I was speaking to someone else that said, just pick up a pen and just start doing something and you'd be surprised. And it's not always how it comes out. It's about how you feel doing it and what the process is and just developing some new skills and hobbies. So this is so inspiring that you do this. I could have asked this question earlier, but how did you get involved teaching art to the visually impaired? How did you get started?
I think that I fell in love when I was entered in the Tactile Museum. This is the real answer. I had a happiest moment when a child at the Low Vision Center, totally blind from birth, after touching a sculpture depicting the bronze of Riace, was able independently to reply the position using perception correctly. Seeing his satisfied face and hearing him tell his mother today I'm a bronze of Riace too, was beyond all words and impossible to describe. When he then drew the figure using the Ridgeline drawing kit, it was the best. So I think that all this kind of experience made me love this job.
Wow. Thank you so much for doing what you do and helping so many people. And everybody has an artist inside of them. Even if you're not good, you can still do it for fun. And then there's different kind of art. Some people maybe are painting, some people sculptor, some people maybe can play music. And we know there's a lot of blind artists that play music too. So sky is the limit. And thank you for sharing and thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe and rate the podcast. It makes a difference. And if you would like to contact me, you can email me at info@cbsyndromepodcast.com.